Good morning, everyone. Good morning. We're going to get started, but please, if you haven't come up to get some lunch, please help yourself. This is a lunch and learn, and today it is risk management and the Rhode Island real estate disclosures. And we are super thankful to Chaz Adams of Mortgage Equity Partners, who is going to come up in a little bit and talk a little bit about his programs. But thank you very much. We are doing Facebook Live today. But you all received our new Kent Washington Association of Realtors Education Committee's loyalty card. It's the Lunch and Learn loyalty card. And you will see that attend 6 Lunch and Learns this year in 2026, and you will be entered for a chance to win local Kent Washington dues. Kent Washington dues for 2027. So it's a value of at least $255. So we're really excited about this new program, and we hope to see you at our future lunch and learns. So be sure, remember you got to bring your card. You got to bring your card. So and Kathleen will mark it, and so we're very excited about that. We do have some upcoming classes here at Kent Washington as a member benefit. They're free to Kent Washington members. So on January 27th, we are offering a negotiating the purchase and sales agreement from 10 to 1. That's 3 core CE credits. On February 5th, from 10 to 12, buyer consultations and compensations, 2 core CE credits. And then on February 17th, from 9 to 12, basics of commercial real estate for 3 CE credits. So it's space is limited because it's going to be here in our classroom. So sign up. We did send out an email promoting it, but go to our website, go to our calendar. You will see all of these classes and you can register. We will be doing another promotional email, but very excited about offering these classes. So yes, I was just reminded, on the back of your loyalty card is a QR code that will take you to our calendar, so you can see where our future lunch and learns are going to be. Okay? So with that being said, I'm super excited to have Chaz come up and talk a little bit about his programs.
Thank you, Linda.
You're welcome.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm Chaz Adams with Mortgage Equity Partners. We'll just call it MEP to make it easier. Some people I do know. For those of you who I don't know, I hope we get to chat a little bit afterwards, but I'm just here to speak about some programs that we have to help make buyers in today's marketplace a little more competitive. And just to take a recent example from last night, I had a buyer go into a house in Rehoboth, Massachusetts, and made an offer. It was a low-price house, around $375,000. He was a first-time buyer, but we were able to make him a cash offer buyer, and he went out and made an offer. There were 12 other offers in, and his offer was accepted, even though he was getting financing. So I think the program is pretty effective. I've had the chance to use it a few times, and we have had success with it. So I just wanted to kind of go through a little PowerPoint presentation, explain it a little more, and then answer any questions that you may have. So this is our MEP Express Cash Offer Program. And I think anybody who's worked with buyers out there understands the challenges in this market getting offers accepted when there are multiple offers, and the benefits of being able to offer cash as opposed to a contingent offer that would be contingent on the mortgage and the appraisal, which this program removes both of those contingencies. There's a little blurb here on the bottom. 70% of finance buyers lost an offer to a cash buyer, and that was per a Redfin survey. But how this program works, and the most important piece of this whole process, is that the client gets a fully underwritten loan commitment. So typically you'll call your lender and you'll get a pre-approval. So you get a pre-approval letter so that you can make an offer on a property. What we do here is we actually, rather than do the pre-approval, I take a full mortgage application with all the supporting documentation, and we ship it off to an underwriter and let them review it and then approve it, subject to finding a property. So now you have the parameters for what you can go out there and look for, and once you find a house, then you can make sure that the property qualifies, make an offer on the house, and you know that the buyer's already approved by an underwriter. So you submit an offer. We have a partner that comes in and allows the offer to be made as a cash offer. So there's no mortgage contingency, there's no appraisal contingency, and they do give you a proof of funds letter so that they show that they have funds to make the offer on behalf of the client if the financing fails to go through. And if the offer is accepted, then it's required that they make a 5% deposit with that offer. So on a $500,000 house, they're cutting a $25,000 check. We also have the ability to make an offer if the client owns another property, and we can remove the Hubbard. It's the same person that we are lined up with, and they come in and they can make an offer on the house that they own, provided that it qualifies. And we can remove the Hubbard clause, so you can make the offer without a Hubbard, without a mortgage contingency, and without an appraisal contingency. And as you can see, 90% of buyers with a home to sell cannot get their offer accepted. So that's another little stat that we'd like to look at. And how the Hubbard Eliminator works. Again, we place an offer on the client's home. When you place an offer on the home, when you're applying for the mortgage on the house that you're going to buy, we don't have to count the debt. You know, any housing expense with the house that they currently own. So if they have a mortgage on it, we don't have to count the mortgage payment, we don't have to count the property taxes, the homeowner's insurance, or anything else that might be associated with the house. And then the only responsibility of the client is to make sure that they can sell their house within 6 months. It's the only thing that they require. And the client agrees to pay a $999 service flat fee for being able to use this program. So there's some other companies out there that charge between 1% and 3% to do this. And the price of a house that can be, you know, $12,000, $18,000, which is pretty substantial. So we have a cash offer program. We have a program that eliminates the Hubbard clause, and we also can combine that with what's called bridge financing. And for those of you who are not familiar with the bridge financing, we're basically going to front you the money on the house that you own so that you can make an offer and use it as a down payment on the house that you're going to buy. Does that make sense? So the great thing about the bridge loan is that there's no payment, so you don't have to count a payment, and will go up to $200,000 as long as there is enough equity in the house that they own. And then again, we like to sell the property within 6 months. And this is an a la carte menu, so you can do a cash offer program, you can combine it with bridge financing, you can do the Hubbard Eliminator, combine it with bridge financing. You can use just one of them, you can use all three of them, or you can combine any two of them. So how does this impact you as real estate agents? You know, buyer offer acceptance rates can increase by 350% in the seller's market. And this is data backed by NAR and some other companies as well. So it's pretty encouraging. And then you just move on to closing, and it's a typical closing. The fees that are charged for this are just put on the closing disclosure as any other fee, and they're only used if the program's used. But it's been effective for us. I've got a couple going on right now using the different products that we offer. But if you have any questions or want to know anything more about it, yes, sir.
You said something in the first step about if the property qualifies.
Mm-hmm.
What are some parameters?
Yep. It's got to be a single-family home.
Okay.
They'll do condos, but it's only 5 units or less, so I don't really consider condos eligible. But if it's 5 units or less, we can do it. And then the maximum price on it is 1.25 million. Anything over that, they're not gonna do. So that's where we are right now. I'm sure they'll tweak it a little as we go forward. But,
Does it have to be their primary residence?
the house that they're buying, yes. And it has to be single family.
So when the buyer makes the offer on the home as a cash sale, and we're doing the PNS, are we putting in that they still have to have the appraisal done?
No, so that's a
Or
great
when do you
question.
do the appraisal? When you do your part?
After they do the mortgage, once the P&S is signed and completed, then the
So we
appraisal
still
will
gotta
come.
be able to get into the listing for an appraisal.
Correct, and there's an addendum that will go out with the purchase contract, the agreement, that actually will outline exactly the company's role in all of this, and what the basic bottom line responsibility and what they're trying to convey to all of the buyers or sellers, depending on who we're dealing with, is that, look, they're here to pay cash based on the terms of the purchase and sales agreement, regardless whether the financing goes through for the buyer
But if
or
it doesn't
not.
appraise,
What's
what
that?
happens if the appraisal doesn't come in?
Then there's actually, that's another good question. They do, has anybody ever applied for a home equity line of credit here? And the bank will do what they call an AVM, an automated
Right.
valuation model, and it's a computer, and they come back and they say, this is what we think your house is worth. This company will do that, and if they feel like the offer is too aggressive,
Okay.
then they charge an additional appraisal gap depending on what the numbers are. So they may have to give a little more than the 5% required down payment. There might have to be, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 more, depending again on the numbers. And that's just their model. It's really, once the appraiser goes out, are they going to be able to make the numbers happen or not? And we have not run into a situation where the appraiser has not been able to make it work. In some cases, we don't even need the appraisal because with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, you get what's known on occasions the property inspection waiver, and you're not even required to do the inspection, the appraisal. And that's a good question.
So what does the pre-approval letter look like? Is it like a proof of funds or?
You get a proof of funds letter, and then you get a commitment from the company saying that, they're gonna buy the house for cash if the financing does not go through for the buyer. And it's all spelled out in the addendum to the contract, and it's very easy to understand. And the sellers have an idea, they're gonna expect an appraiser, but they know that the terms of the contract are gonna be honored regardless.
Do you have to disclose that it is actually, that they have, it looks like it's a cash offer, but, it actually,
It is a cash offer, because if the financing doesn't go through, they're gonna come in and buy the property.
oh, okay.
Yep, so you don't have to disclose anything outside of the normal cash offer, stuff that you put in the purchase and sales agreement. And it's very useful when you combine it with some of the other programs. I actually have a couple right now that are, they're not doing the cash offer portion, but they are keeping their property. They're buying the new property, and we're using the bridge financing to give them the down payment. So they're gonna keep their property, move into the next one, then stage it and get it ready, and then sell it, and then they'll pay off the bridge loan. But because they had the offer on their property, I didn't have to count any of the property expenses in the mortgage application, which is good because they're retired and they're on a fixed income, and it wouldn't have worked. So it does help, and it's putting deals together that we may not have been able to do. Okay.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Chaz. Thank you so much for your sponsorship and
my
all that you
pleasure.
do to support our association over the years.
My turn?
Super appreciate that. Kathleen will take care of that. And so, we are very excited to have our very own Monica Staff, the RIAR General Counsel, present today on disclosures. So Monica, come on up. And Monica, I'm just going to ask if you can project a little bit your voice, because we are on Facebook Live. Yes, yay!
Thank you.
Alrighty, okay. Did everybody get handouts for today? There are handouts here if you want them. Thank you, Monica.
Thanks, Linda. Thanks for inviting me today. Let me know if you can't hear. I'm trying to project for this. So, anyway, it's always nice to see a group of realtors who are eager to ask questions. So I'm trying to figure out who's in the I'm on the firing line, but who's gonna have the tough questions for me, so. So we're gonna talk about the 4 mandatory disclosures in Rhode Island. One I'm just gonna spend about a minute on, but the other 3 we'll get into in depth. And I do wanna give a special shout out to Kathleen because I brought one handout that I copied, which is we'll talk about the real estate disclosures. It's a cheat sheet, kind of a chart that compares the disclosures. And then my PowerPoint, I emailed to Kathleen thinking, well, just in case someone asks for a copy, you can send it to them afterwards. And when I got here, she made copies of everything and said, I know my members. If one person asks, everybody's gonna want it. So I'm sure she had other things to do this morning, but that was very nice of her to do. So thank you for being better organized than I was, Kathleen. So anyway, so the disclosures, so the Education Committee just wanted me to talk about some of the risk aspects of disclosures. So the way I thought we'd do it is, hopefully everyone knows what the disclosures are. We'll do that in a second. Well, we'll do a little bit of background on each, a little bit of talk about what some of the exemptions are, and then I want to share frequently asked questions I get through the legal hotline, and what areas seem to trip people up. Sometimes they're questions people ask me, or other times as people are talking, I'm kind of going, no, they didn't do that. So it's a combination of those kind of questions, whatever you come up with. So, before I even advance the slide, so what are the disclosures? Who can name a mandatory disclosure in Rhode Island? I heard a few.
Relationship.
Yep, mandatory real estate relationship. Did you say property? Real estate? Yep, real estate disclosure. Family. Lead and family. Yep. Okay, good group. Now we can just flip through this slide. Yep, you got them all right. On this one, the disclosure one of personal family interest, that's the one we're going to spend about a minute on because it's pretty straightforward and I get a lot less questions on that. Okay, here's the cheat sheet I was just holding up. And what you see on that is it lists the 4 main types of disclosures. It lists kind of when they're required, what some of the exemptions are. And so just kind of a little handy guide. And this was one I can't take credit for by myself. The Rhode Island Association of Realtors has a risk management committee. And so they're the ones who were looking at what kind of areas where I get a lot of questions about. Disclosures was one area, and they said, can we do something to make it easier for our members? So believe it or not, this is on rarealtors.org. We have a lot of information there. Sometimes you gotta kind of hunt around for it, but that's what I got a handout. Okay, whip in through these. Okay, so we'll start with, I'm saving the sales disclosure for one of the last ones, because that's probably where I get the most questions. But the mandatory real estate relationship disclosure. So what's it for? What do you do with it?
Everyone.
Yeah, everyone? Yeah, right, I mean, it's to disclose your relationship with the consumer so that they understand if you're acting on their behalf or someone else's behalf. So the properties that are covered by it, so first actually I'll mention the timing of it, and I've got this on each of the slides when you're required to provide it. So the timing of it is before confidential information is disclosed. So that can come at different points in a transaction or well before you get to a transaction. At the very latest, you have to provide the form before signing of a purchase and sales agreement, but the confidentiality is what comes first. Okay, and as you can tell, I'm talking fast, so if you have something that pops up or have a delayed reaction, feel free to jump in. All right, so the covered properties. This has changed a bit over the years, but the properties for which you're required to give a mandatory real estate relationship disclosure by Rhode Island law are vacant land that's zoned for 1 to 2 units, or land with 1 to 4 units already built on it. It used to be all land was covered by this. And I have to say, this is something I know that drives me nuts, so it probably drives all of you nuts since you're using these in the field. I wish they all had the same properties that were covered and the same exemptions, and it would make life a lot simpler. That's part of why we put together that cheat sheet that compares the disclosures, just to kind of get those straight. So, okay, so one of the things that's kind of newer with the mandatory, I say newer like in the past few years with the mandatory real estate relationship disclosure, is the Department of Business Regulation adopted a regulation when teams were kind of becoming the big thing that they are now, but they were just sort of emerging in the field. So there is a team disclosure, actually it's a team addendum to the mandatory real estate relationship disclosure. So on that team addendum, what are you putting down? Anyone ever used that before? Okay. I will answer my own question while you're eating. All right, some of these other ones are gonna make you work though, so you gotta keep chewing. All right, yeah, so with the team disclosure, the idea is, let's say you've got 5 people on a team. So on the addendum, you're listing everyone who's on the team and what their relationship is gonna be like to that consumer. So you might think, how do I know what my relationship? I don't even know the person. Someone else on my team is working with this person. That's why if you're part of a team, you wanna have a team policy that talks about, can different people on the same team, do they all have the same relationships? Let's say, I'll look at Bill. Let's say Bill is working with a buyer and he is going to be a designated client representative for that buyer. So if for all the rest of you, actually right up here, if you're all on Bill's team, what are you in relationship to that buyer?
Same thing.
It's a trick question. In some teams, that would be the absolute right answer. It boils down to what your company policy is and what the team's policy is. Yeah, so it could be everyone on the same team is going to have the exact same relationship, or other people might just want to treat that person as a customer to the extent they get any calls or questions or trying to cover or anything like that while Bill's away. So that's the importance of getting this figured out in advance, so someone isn't just scrambling with the team addendum right at the time of meeting with the consumer. So, and so a lot of them you can have, no, I'm interrupting myself. Okay, questions about that? I see some looks. I know you're giving me a look. So,
If they're, I'm not on a team, but if my broker or another agent needs to help out because I'm unavailable for a particular time, do they have to be listed?
if someone's doing coverage, then yeah, it'd be good for them to be listed.
Okay.
Yeah, or they could even do a separate one if they're not formally part of the team but might be pitching in.
Yeah,
Well,
it
you're
would just
right.
be potential, today I'm sick, I can't meet you, so I have to have them sign one for that, okay.
Yeah, and I know some of this, some of the paperwork seems like a nuisance, but it's really just so consumers know who's advocating for them and who isn't. Because if I knew Bill were representing me as a buyer, that someone else in the team has a listing that I may be interested in, you know what I mean? I might want Bill's advice, but if I knew that you were representing the seller or at least weren't representing me, I might, ask questions a little bit differently. So.
What are some of the different relationships on the team?
Good question. It can be just like everyone else, designated client representative for the buyer, seller, landlord or tenant, or transaction facilitator. So those would be the main ones. The principal broker would be would typically be a transaction coordinator. Yeah.
Okay, so there's not a whole slew of them. There's not terribly many of them.
Yeah, if there's nothing more than what would be on the basic disclosure, it's just the difference is with the addendum, it's a list of everybody who's on the team, their check boxes next to their name.
Okay, so just in that parameter.
Yeah, so, yeah. Okay, all right, and let's see, we got this, okay, we got this one covered. And so some of the exemptions from the mandatory real estate relationship disclosure, I don't know if I'm blocked, can people see? Okay, all right. So the mandatory real estate relationship disclosure. So if you've got land, so basically land with 5 or more dwelling units, no disclosure is required. And then for vacant land, if it's zoned for 3 or more dwellings, commercial, industrial, anything but residential, anything but 1 to 2 family dwellings, then no disclosure is required. I get that question, I'd say, about commercial. Sometimes people have like a smaller commercial property, and they'll say, do I need to do a disclosure? How do I handle that? I mean, you certainly can do it voluntarily, but the law itself only requires what we've talked about here. Okay.
And estate sales? Estate sales?
Yep, those will be covered with this one. But come back to that question for the sales disclosure, because that's definitely a relevant one and a frequently asked question there. Yeah. Okay, let's look at some of the questions that I get and see if we have any of yours to add to this. Okay, so here's the burning one. I've been getting a ton of this one. So we'll see how the room wants to, and you don't have to talk if you're eating, you can just raise your hand. Okay, is a cooperating broker required to give a copy of his or her mandatory real estate relationship disclosure that's signed by the buyer?
No.
They have to give it to the listing broker.
No.
Oh, you are good. You said it before I even finished the question. So this is a group that is fortified by the lunch courtesy of our sponsor. That is the correct answer. No.
But sometimes they put it up on the MLS anyway.
If they can do it if they want to, but they're not required to do it. I think some of it might be, people just getting, and I know sometimes I'll put myself in this category. Sometimes things sometimes things that were in effect 20 years ago, when I think, oh, it was just yesterday when it was like this. And sometimes it's hard to unlearn the new, learn the new laws, learn the new habits. I don't know if companies are doing checklists and requiring listing brokers to get these, but if you are doing that, knock it off. No one's required to give you a copy of the disclosure. So it's between you and your client or customer, whoever you're working directly with, or customers. Okay. Another one, actually we just kind of covered this, but can team members represent different clients in the same transaction?
Disclose that.
It depends on the format of the team and the brokerage.
Okay, a lot of excellent comments here. Yeah, so it goes back to the policy of the brokerage, and not just the team. I talked about team policy before, but the brokerage also has a say in anything that's happening underneath that person's roof or under that person's license. Yeah, part of it. So it wouldn't be a dual facilitation if it's two different team members. So, you could have one that is a designated client representative for a seller or landlord, someone else on the same team designated client rep for the buyer or tenant. But again, if it's allowed by policy, and also, and we're talking, part of what the committee wanted me to talk about were flags some areas of risk. Part of it you're looking at it, and I see some of you kind of thinking, I don't know if that's the best idea. There are a lot of things that they might be legal. Is there a better way to do them? I would look at this, like part of it is, how big is the team? How likely are the consumers how likely are they to kind of, if you have a team of like a couple of people or something like that, and you normally support each other in transactions, that might be a lot trickier than with a larger team. What's the consumer's perception? Do they just assume that everyone on the team, and especially when teams promote themselves, depending on how they promote themselves, are they just assuming like everyone on the team has their back and is acting on their behalf? So whoever said disclosure to, even though it's the whole topic of this, but just disclosure, how are you describing this to a consumer? So, other thoughts about this one? Okay, but definitely an potential area of risk, depending on how it's done. Okay, here's one. I'm looking at Bill again because I bet he knows the answer to this one.
I very much do. I may not be popular because of it. But
okay. All right, but anyone else can chime in too. Why isn't there a check? So you've seen it. I did not bring copies of it because I'm hoping we're just trying to do like a higher level review of the forms. Why isn't there a checkbox for dual facilitation on the mandatory real estate relationship disclosure? I really didn't even put you in the spot.
well,
I guess the question, really like, when you sign that, in theory, when you sign that disclosure with your client or customer, you don't know that you're entering into you may not know you're entering into a dual situation, right? Like you don't go in with the intention of representing both your buyer and your seller. It usually just kind of happens by accident or other.
Yeah. No, that, and then part of it too is that for dual facilitation, you need to have the informed consent of the buyer and seller,
Right.
or informed consent of,
Right.
plus
You
the
don't-
principal
right.
broker.
You don't have both parties generally.
Right, and then plus the principal broker is what the law says, signing on to it. So unless you've got the principal broker just sort of hanging around there, you know, waiting to sign. But anyway, that's kind of bleeds into the next question too. But yeah, but that's just it, is that normally you don't know the second that you're giving a mandatory real estate relationship disclosure to someone that you're entering into dual facilitation. And also, to get into dual facilitation, what do you have to be first? This is one person having not just both sides of the transaction, but one person, what would be my relationship before I get into dual facilitation? If my brokerage allows it, like, you know, allows it, all of that. What relationship would I have with the buyer first?
Client,
Yep, client rep. And what about the seller?
client.
Exactly. So I'm disclosing to them first that I'm working with them as a client representative before you go into the next steps. Okay, and let's press on. So this is the $1 million question. It's not so much on the form itself, but I think it's by far the most frequently asked question I get about real estate relationships. And that is, I'm a designated client, so I'll slow down on this one. I'm heavily caffeinated this morning. I'm a designated client representative for the seller, and an unrepresented buyer either approaches me directly to arrange a showing or walks into my open house. So, what am I?
You're a client rep to your seller. You're a client rep to your seller.
And how about to the buyer?
Nothing.
Well, you're,
And unless that buyer asks you to represent them until they present the conversation, you are nothing to them.
right,
You have to be open and honest with them because that's your ethical obligation.
Have them sign your transaction coordinator if they want to work with you.
But then you're doomed. But then
No,
you're
no,
so
no.
But then you're not
No. You don't represent a transaction facilitator. You only represent clients.
Right.
So you have the discussion with the buyer as they walk in, and you ask them, do you want me to represent you or not? And if they want representation, then you sign a mandatory relationship disclosure with them as a buyer rep, as a designated client representative. And then you show the house. And then if they make an offer, then you're potentially in a dual facilitator situation. So you need to have that discussion with your broker, whether it's allowed or not.
Yeah, the broker has to sign off on any kind of dual facilitation. And also the clients, what it means by informed consent. If you've ever had any kind of medical procedure or medical treatment, when they talk about informed consent, yeah, then it's talking about, like, I don't know if you've ever had to sign one. I remember having like foot surgery one time and having to sign or minor foot surgery and having to sign something that talked about, you know, well, my foot could end up being amputated and all these. And so you're not quite that gory when it gets into real estate, but I know, for example, if I were a first-time home buyer and I happen to know, which I wouldn't up front, if I happen to know that the seller was someone you've been a builder who you list, you know, a subdivision with you a year, or if I found out that the seller were your a mother, which is a different disclosure, you know, I might kind of think like, can the person really be kind of treated as equally in this transaction? So that's part of informed consent, is like knowing what the facts are, and also, but mainly understanding how does the representation change. I sign a form with you saying you represent me and you're an advocate for me. You act in my best interest, and all of a sudden you're not. You're still helping me. There's still plenty of things you can do for me, but a lot of the things I thought you were going to do for me, you can't do anymore. So that's why it's important that consumers understand that. Some brokerages, I mean, it's legal to do. Some brokerages have policies that they want to have someone refer to someone else in that kind of a situation. So one person in the brokerage can represent the seller, another represents the buyer. There are different ways to do it. A lot of this goes back to policies. So if you're talking about risk management, brokers, this is an area to take a look at if you haven't. Yep, a couple hands back here.
So, go ahead.
So I can't be a transaction coordinator. Someone comes in, I tell them I represent the seller. And I tell the person that comes in they want to buy the house. For the buyers, I can't be a transaction coordinator for the buyers?
could be a transaction facilitator.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I found it.
Yeah, you're treating them where the seller is still your client,
Yeah.
the buyer's your customer.
Yes.
Right.
What's really important to understand is the buyer needs to understand
Right.
that if you're not representing them, and you the buyer, say something like, well, this house is worth every bit of $540,000, but I want to start my offer at $520, you represent the seller.
Right.
So the buyer needs to understand that you're gonna go running back to the seller and tell them everything you told them. All my financial secrets, all my negotiating secrets. Would you want to be the buyer in that situation? So it needs to be the buyer's choice whether you represent them or not.
Yeah, but,
Right.
but the thing for the buyer, I represent the seller. The buyer comes in, yeah, I could be a transaction facilitator for you, but I want to know I can't represent you, I can't coach you on price.
Wait, you can represent them.
Okay, but I
I'm
got
not
two more
gonna represent
disclosures to get
I'm-
through,
I'm
so.
not gonna
This
represent
has to
you.
be broken out into each
You
disclosure.
know what I mean? I'm not gonna represent you, but I can do the paperwork for you. You tell me the price you wanna offer. Whatever you tell me, I'm gonna tell my seller because I represent them, not you, but I can do the paperwork for you. Here's the transaction, and that's how you do it, yeah? That's one way, provided the policy allows it in the office.
Okay, and so just in the interest of time, as you can tell, there's a lot of discussion about this, but we've got to get through lead and sales disclosure and 1 minute on family and personal interests, so, okay. All right, so timings, the seller and lessor lead disclosures. Okay, so the timing is, you give it before the buyer, I should have put tenant in there too, before one of them is contractually obligated to purchase or lease the property. So that's why you see in the Rhode Island Association of Realtors Purchase and Sales Agreement, why you see that separate section about lead, because the buyer does have an independent right to get out. The properties that are covered by this are pre-1978 dwelling units. So question for you, let's say, now I know a lot of people think of commercial as 5 units and above. Let's say I'm listing I'm listing for sale a property with 10 units. It's a small apartment building. Lead disclosure is required if it's built before 1978.
Yes.
Okay, some brave people in the back are nodding and saying yes.
No.
Correct. Yes. It applies to dwelling units. So like we saw with the mandatory real estate relationship disclosure, we're only talking 1 to 4 units. This applies if it's got something someone can legally live in and it's built before 1978. Disclosure required. Okay. And then also when you're providing the disclosures, you're providing potentially two other documents with it. So you're providing any kind of lead certificates. If the seller or landlord has lead certificates, you're providing a copy of that or a list of those, any kind of reports that they have. And then the EPA book, that brochure, how to protect families from lead in your home. And now the biggest one with that is there have been some changes to it in recent years, but there are some pages that are specific to Rhode Island. So if you have that form, so if you take it out of Transaction Desk or whatever forms platform that you use, that will have the one with the Rhode Island pages in it. Because if you just pull it off the federal EPA website, that's just gonna have the federal language. Rhode Island law requires I wanna say about 5-6 pages. I should have counted before I got here, but there are about 5 or 6 pages that talk specifically about Rhode Island lead requirements. And it was recently updated a few months ago to include information about the rental registry. So that's all on there.
So Monica, do you even have to, I'm over here. That's okay.
Stereo.
Do you even have to provide a lead if it's post 1978?
Excellent question, and that's a frequently asked question I get. What do you think?
I just, better safe than sorry, so I always do it, but I would think you wouldn't have to actually.
And you'd be correct.
Don't have to.
If it's built, and it's built after January 1st, 1978, no lead disclosure is required. You have to register the property as an exemption with the Department of Health, but no lead disclosure is required. Okay. And actually, oh, and I forgot to tell you, I do have a link. I know it's hard to see on here, And I can send it out separately, but there is a link to the most current version of the EPA booklet, kind of hidden in yellowish text here. Yep, go ahead.
So my question is about what is our risk and our responsibility if you represent, let's say, the landlord of a building, they contract you to rent out one of their units. What is your responsibility in their adherence to the registration laws of their unit? Do you understand the question?
I do. I'd say a lot of it will depend on whether you're a rental agent versus a property manager.
Okay.
If you're a rental agent, I'm not gonna say there is a risk now because of the crackdown, because of the rental registry. I can't say it's risk-free to rent. I mean, there are always risks associated with renting a property that wasn't in compliance with the lead law. With a property manager, yeah, I think you have a lot more direct liability because then you're into the management of the property itself. Even if you're not, depending on what the details of your job are, you're probably someone listed as on the by the landlord on the lease or elsewhere for the tenant to contact if there are issues with the property. If there were some kind of a poisoning or an issue like that, then yeah, you'd be right on the front line of that. So it's not the way, it used to be like basically people widely ignored the lead law, I have to say.
So how do we
But now
avert,
it's
how do we avert that risk? Let's take out the front
Yeah.
window and not the back, but how do we
Yep.
avert that risk if like you know that your seller or landlord is not in compliance with the most updated lead registration?
From
Well-
a legal person, go ahead.
Yes.
You can see right on the website.
I can't even see the website, yeah, but okay.
Well, if you
Yeah, I
Google
can see it,
RI
yeah.
lead registry, it'll say, does this have certificates or not? Period. So either the owner has to upload them or you as the property manager have to
But I'm not
upload
the
them.
property manager, I'm the realtor hired to rent out a unit.
Well, that's what Monica's saying. The best practice would be for you to inform the owner that you've got to be on the registry if you're renting this property.
Okay,
If you inform them and they refuse, then that's up to you whether you want to take on that risk or not.
Exactly, good answer.
But if you're the property manager, you absolutely have to.
What's my risk if I do that, for example? What's my risk?
Massive. There's a $50 per month, per unit fine for not having your certificate, and $150 per month, per unit fine for not registering the
For
property.
the owner, but I'm the agent. What's my risk as the agent?
Well, and also for the, and this is also for the owner, you're asking about the agent, but also for the owner, they can't evict for non-payment of rent.
Right, I understand that part, I'm just talking about the agent part.
I'd say a lawsuit,
Well,
if
yeah,
there's a lead case.
if they're gonna get tagged $200 per unit per month, that's gonna be a massive fine.
Yeah,
And they're gonna be looking to you to say, why didn't you tell me?
but I already told them and they ignored me.
Well, that's,
That's where you need-
now you're risking a lawsuit and.
And that's where the practice tip is having that paper trail, because you'll get dragged into it.
yeah.
Even as a rental agent, you'll get dragged into it, is,
Guaranteed.
yeah. Yeah, and I realize it's a dilemma, you got law, you got business, but now you have a lot more landlords in compliance than there used to be, and a lot more aggressive enforcement by the Attorney General. Okay, we'll take a look at some of the exemptions here. I won't go through the whole list, but vacant land is one. So no lead. I know sometimes people say, what about lead in the soil? If you want to, like you were saying before, if you want to give disclosures when they're not required, the client's okay with it. They're willing to fill it out. They know that it's not mandatory, but they want to err on the side of caution. Perfectly fine to do, but not required. So you got the newer units, short-term rentals, 100 days or less. So the 100 days or less is to the same person. Those are exempt from lead disclosure. And something like elderly housing, no bedrooms. Anyway, you can see the list yourself in the handout. I won't go through the whole thing, just in the interest of time. Okay, so let's look at some of our frequently asked questions. Actually, one of them I already asked you, and you already answered that one. And here's one I've been getting recently, the second one. If a seller or landlord has provided current lead certificates, do they still have to give a lead disclosure form?
Yes.
Yes.
You gotta say yes.
And they check
Yes.
off that they haven't provided.
Exactly. Confident group here, and everyone's right who said something, so. Okay, we just answered this one. Lead disclosure is required for short-term rentals. No, they're not, as long as it's 100 days or less to the same person. And here's one, now, getting to sales. If I own a property, rental property, or even a home with a tenant, a tenant in it, it doesn't necessarily have to be a multi-unit. If it's built before 1978, I don't have, let's say I'm ignoring the law, or I don't have the money to comply with the law, there are no lead certificates, even though there are tenants there. Can I sell without lead certificates?
Yes, as long as you disclose.
Beautiful, yes. Yep, you can still sell. Now, one thing, and cover your ears from a lender's perspective. One question that's been swirling around, and I've been getting the conveyancing attorneys committee of the Bar Association has been talking about, are lenders requiring lead certificates in order to close? Not seeing any kind of widespread, more like perhaps some specialized types of loans. Can't predict the future, but another reason. And also, if I'm representing a buyer, depending on how sophisticated and what resources the buyer has, if there are tenants in the property when I'm buying it, am I inheriting a potential mess? Because there are no certificates. What if there was an injury? What if there was a lead poisoning or something like that beforehand? So, okay, pressing on because we have 10 minutes left. I saved the best for last. Okay, well, the other one's a minute, like I keep saying, but anyway. All right, the real estate sales disclosure. Timing, it has to be provided to the buyer before the buyer's offer is communicated. So that means, I know sometimes people have put in, there aren't sales disclosures, or at least not that you've received if you're working on the buy side, but sometimes people will put in the purchase and sales agreement subject to the buyer getting a sales disclosure from the seller. I realize people are making the best of a bad situation, but right there's already a legal violation by doing that. Okay. So covered properties. This is required. Remember how I said all the different covered properties, it's all different from each type of disclosure? This one is the properties that require a sales disclosure, vacant land or land with 1 to 4 dwelling units. One of the things you'll see, and actually somebody asked me about right before we began today, on this cheat sheet is about mobile homes. So I'll ask you the question. If a mobile home is on leased land, is a sales disclosure required? I see a confident shake of the head back here.
I don't think so.
Yes.
The head shake is correct.
Okay, it's not.
Yeah, it's not required because it's on leased land. If a mobile home or any kind of home, tiny home, whatever, were on land that were sold with it, yes, absolutely.
Isn't that odd, because you're living in there for stuff land?
Yeah. You are, and actually a lead disclosure would be required for a mobile home. But if it were pre-1978,
Right.
let's say, but yeah.
The disclosure asks questions about age of your hot water tank or the roof. Why would you not require that kind of information?
Per mobile home?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one of those things where if you would have a discussion with the seller, they're not required to do it, but you might say, hey, I think this will help, here's why. And just, right, so that, a seller can voluntarily do any of it, you just wanna make sure it's just not what the law itself requires. So, okay. So there are different versions of this you might have seen in whatever forms platform you use. They're used to do one sales disclosure. A lot of people who did work with land were just saying why, just like the questions you were mentioning a minute ago. Why do I have to give a seller a form with all these questions about things where there's no building? We're asking questions about the roof and the hot water tank and everything. Why did they do that? So now legally there is a separate land disclosure. That was actually legislation filed to make that possible, that actually the Realtor Association filed to make possible. So there's a separate land disclosure, a lot shorter than the regular sales disclosure. There's also a separate one, even though we're talking 1 to 4 units, there's the main sales disclosure form. There's also a multi-unit with an addendum for each unit. So if there are differences in each unit, you can't fit them all in one place. Those are all available. So as you can tell, I don't have forms in front of us because we're just kind of doing the high level, but that's just really a reminder or education if you weren't aware of those. Okay, so let's press on to our, exemptions. And these are part of the exemptions. And I know Christine had asked about estate sales before, so we're gonna take a look at that in a moment.
I was confused.
So, yeah, so there are a whole long list of exemptions from the sales disclosure requirement. Properties with more than 4 dwelling units. We talked about building on leased land, buildings with no dwelling units. So anything that's commercially zoned that has just, a commercial office condo, let's say, or something like that. No disclosure is required for that. Okay, now here's the longer list. And it's very tiny, so that's why you have a handout. Handouts, one courtesy of Kathleen and one on the cheat sheet. So this is written in the PowerPoint itself. It's in the cheat sheet too for the most part. But anyway, I won't go through every one of them, but the ones that come up a lot. Estate sales. So I inherit property from a family member, and the property has not yet passed to me. Let's say I'm the executrix of the estate. So if I'm selling the property in the estate of, well, I don't want to use myself because I want to be alive, but anyway, the estate of John Doe, let's say, or the estate of Jane Doe, if I'm selling the property in that name, do I need a sales disclosure?
No.
Correct. Those are exempt. Now, what if it's already gone through probate and the property is passed to the heirs? Like maybe we're squabbling about that, someone's living in there, we're trying to deal with all that. We finally agree to sell.
You do, but technically you do. So I have a situation right now, the aunt passed, went through probate, did whatever with their estate attorney. I talked to him yesterday, and he said the surviving niece is the sole owner now of this particular unit. But she never lived there. So the information on, it's a condo in a complex, I legitimately know more about the complex than she does. So does she have to fill, by law, she's supposed to fill, but what is she gonna fill out? She doesn't know anything, she never lives there.
No. And that's what unknown is for, on the form, but yes, legally she's required. And what I suggest, and this is not, and you're not required to do this piece of it, but in the sales disclosure form, there's an additional provisions section right above the signature lines. Sometimes it's something like that. Again, no one has to do this, but you could just have the person, whoever's the niece or whoever's filling it out, just write a sentence saying, I've never lived in the property, or you might have adult children saying I haven't lived here since I was a child. Just so that way the buyer doesn't think that you're just kind of blowing them off or concealing things. You're giving a reason. Not required, but Bill.
Yeah, and you're not required. I had an estate which I was selling, and 5 children. One became the executrix of the estate. It had not gone through probate, but they had been managing it for their father for 5 or 6 or 7 years. So they knew everything about the property. They knew how old the roof was. They knew how old things had been swapped out, like the water heater and so forth. I counseled them, maybe it's a good idea that you do include, because you know all of this information. It'll give confidence to the buyer.
Exactly.
And that's what they chose to do. And after the transaction, the buyer thanked the seller for giving that information, and they said exactly that. It gave them confidence that the property was well cared for, and they were getting what they were seeing.
Yes.
The other thing I'll point out is, even though the estate doesn't have to give a disclosure, if you've had a property inspection and you, the licensed real estate agent, now know that there's a leak in the roof and there's things that may not be seen by the buyer, you need to disclose.
You could disclose it without the property disclosure, though, you could just tell them and show
Yes.
them, right?
Yeah, and
Yes,
you'll
but
see
you
that.
can't just blanket hide behind, oh, this is a
No, right.
foreclosure.
Right.
So there aren't, but
Right,
if
if you have
it went under
independent knowledge.
contract and it came out 9 days later, so you had a property inspection, right, and nothing was found? Well, it's a foreclosure, I don't have to they don't have to disclose it. They becomes, I don't have to disclose it.
Yeah,
then
can
you
you
get
talk
some
about the
credit.
risk involved in that, because
Yeah,
that,
please.
yeah, could you? Yeah, so from a realtor's standpoint, right, exactly what Bill said. I had a transaction, the agent was terrible. The house needed significant things, including the foundation was separated from the basement floor. So that's a major thing. He's like, I don't wanna know about it. I said, well, you have to know, because I know I have to tell you. Here's our inspection report, I shared it with him. He's like, I don't wanna know, I don't wanna know. What's the risk? Obviously, he didn't wanna know because he didn't wanna tell the seller. Like, they were not going to, if my clients had backed out, they were not going to disclose that. What is the risk and what is the liability on us as realtors to knowingly disclose?
Well, put it this way, I've never, even though I'm not a litigator, I've never heard of la la la, I'm not listening as a defense that's held up in court.
Not yet.
So you can ask a litigator whom you know if that works. But yeah, no, something like that. I've heard people say like, I don't, if a buyer wants to back out in the first transaction because of inspections, don't send me the inspection report or just, and I understand people are, in some ways, you're trying to balance the needs of your seller client, but if it fell apart for one buyer because of inspections, why wouldn't the same issue if no one does anything about it or
I
discloses
think
it?
it's true that like you
Why
can get
wouldn't
one
it?
inspector to say one thing and another inspector to say another, but there was no qualms about the fact that there was a gap between the back wall of the garage and the basement floor that was this big. I mean, it was 3 inches big. Like I could see it with my eye, and I am not a trained inspector or engineer or anything.
Well, and also keep in mind, like you all have errors and omission insurance. Sellers don't necessarily have that kind of protection. So if someone can find a way to drag you into any kind of thing, they will. So, and I'm sorry, I realize we're just slightly past 12:30. So if anyone needs to go, I've got like 2 more slides here. So I'm going to get to the frequently asked questions on this, but you will not offend me if you need to leave, because I know we were promised this time. I'll mention a couple more, but you've got the whole list here. Estates and trusts come up a lot. Our trusts are not exempt. Our trusts are exempt from the sales disclosure requirement. And even sometimes people will say, well, what if the sellers created the trust, they're the trustees, they're the beneficiaries, they've been living in the property for 20 years, don't they have to disclose? Legally, no. Should they? Yeah, if you can convince them to give, and I think Bill gave a very good example about just building that confidence. If I'm a buyer, am I gonna feel better having disclosures? Or just kind of having this blank slate when I go in? So trying to figure out, but part of it's trying to get the seller to understand, is this benefit the seller?
Right.
All right. This one we we talked about the second one already. The first one, if I'm an investor or flipper, am I exempt from the sales disclosure?
No.
Correct. Okay. We can zip through these. Like I said, one of them if you gotta go. Must a seller disclose that a death or crime occurred in the property?
No.
Correct? Oh, this is the flash round. Okay. How about that a house is haunted?
No.
Right. Now, with these, as we're getting to the pattern, actually, I'll ask this last one, then I'll wrap this part up. What about that there is a sex offender in the neighborhood? Correct. Now, what happens? Point blank, the cooperating broker or buyer says, did a murder take place in this house?
Then you have to tell them the truth.
Yeah, either you don't answer or you tell them the truth.
Or directors of the police department.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, or you can also discuss a strategy with the seller if you know that there's an issue like that. Neither one of you is required to volunteer that information or say anything, although if you are asked point blank and you don't answer, that sort of answers it by itself. But especially if there's something sensitive, like there is a suicide, you know, of a family member or something like that that took place. If it's something that the neighbors are gonna be yakking about, is, you know, do you wanna have that conversation with the seller in case someone asks, or how do you wanna approach this? You don't have to get into any details about who it was, what happened. It might just be as simple as, you know, there's a death that took place in the property, but not required to. Okay, I think we are at that. Okay.
That's an interesting.
Yeah, this one, we were already talking about, but what if you have independent knowledge that the seller is not disclosing everything? And that was what some of you were asking about. Right, and actually I keep looking at Bill, but it's, other of you are giving good answers as well.
Walk
because-
away.
Right, my line of vision. Right, I mean, that's just it, because then could you get, you know, because the worst case scenario, which kind of gets into this next one, what option does the buyer have
Well,
of
what
the
if you
seller?
represent the buyer and the buyer knows that the seller's agent knows that they have not disclosed things? Like, I mean, do you understand the question?
Well, if they found out afterwards or late in the transaction that.
During the transaction.
Yeah, or during the transaction that there was
It was
a major
blatantly
problem.
obvious.
Right, a major problem that wasn't disclosed by anybody. Now, part of it with the disclosure is it's what the seller actually knows, what you know, so it's not that you have a suspicion, it's do you have the actual knowledge.
If
So
the
sometimes,
floor is covered up by cardboard boxes, do they know that it's there? Yeah.
well, then you start looking at, and that goes to,
But what is the, yeah, I mean, is
But it
that
goes to what the
ethics
buyer
against
can-
the other agent, is that like, I mean, you can't sue the seller because what are you gonna sue them for? But is that an ethics complaint against the other agent? By my client?
If you believe the
deviant.
seller knew something that they didn't disclose, you can sue them, sure.
absolutely.
Well, they sold their house over, but,
Well, no, but
Even
who's
if the transaction's
responsible?
over, that's the only recourse action.
yeah.
Right. Anyway, just, I'm just gonna say two more comments, and then we'll just wrap up with that, because I know we're really getting over here, so sorry about that, but you've had some great great questions and lively conversation about this. But, yeah, with something like that, if you know that the seller, or if the seller is covering something up, they're covering up the floor, they're painting over, you know, mold, they're, covering over wet spots, things like that. Yeah, I mean, at some point it gets from just not non-disclosure, it gets to fraud. The
Yeah.
difficulty for a buyer is proving it, unless you can get the seller to negotiate on something. How do you prove that the
So
person
again,
knew?
what's the risk to us, like, if there's blatant fraud on the disclosure? That's why, like, you know.
You gotta speak up or be prepared to walk away from the seller, otherwise you're part of it. And this is talking about not just ethics complaint, it's talking about Department of Business regulation, it's talking about a lawsuit, you've got Arizona Mission Insurance,
So you-
potentially makes you a
So you
target.
said fraud, so
It can be, yeah.
so if you have clients, right, buyers, and there's fraud by the seller, and you said, like, they can either sue or negotiate, so we negotiate.
Yes, yeah, the seller's gonna pay for repairs, the buyer can
Yeah.
decide whether to back out of the transaction altogether, maybe it's not worth it at the same price. There are
Right.
issues like that, but yeah, if someone's actively concealing something, not just, I mean, non-disclosure is bad enough if you know of it. If someone is actively concealing, then, or part of that in any way, then you're looking at fraud, not just negligence, not just non-disclosure. Okay, and I know there's a lot more to discuss, but I'm already holding people over. Anyway, so, let's just do these two. Must a seller disclose a previous condition?
Yes.
Well, it kind of depends on what it is, right?
But, yeah,
A
that's
flood,
just-
yes, but termites?
Yes, it's in the
If it's
disclosure.
been repaired.
It's in the disclosure.
Yeah, that's the issue, is if it's been
Oh, yeah,
repaired.
it's on the census, okay.
What do you mean, you like,
Well, if there was a problem and then the seller says, oh, I took care of that. You know, there was a fire here a few years ago, there was a flood, there were termites, I took care of it. My answer to that would be, how confident are you in the seller that the problem was completely taken care of? You know, do you say that we did have a problem, here's what we did? Or not say anything and hope for the best? And hope it doesn't come back again? So
I think
that's your
we
risk
need to
strategy.
remember, like Bill has said, we need to remember that the disclosure is not always a negative thing. And I tell my buyers that, like, if you see that there was a flood in the basement, don't be alarmed, as long as they did the right thing to remediate it, right?
Right.
And that's where we should advise our sellers to use that space below that says, explain. Like, if something is yes on one of those, you know, flood, fire, whatever, explain what you did or what happened. Again, to just give confidence to the buyer that, okay, something happened, but something was fixed. So, and I'm saying this is, like, I think that's our responsibility, is to make the house, to make a buyer as confident as possible to move forward.
So people will come down differently on the risk aspects of it, but the main thing is you don't want to be part of the problem if you have independent knowledge. And then we talked about this inspection report issue before. So I promised the disclosure of personal and, I always watch the name of that form. Disclosure of personal and family, and whatever that one is. I can do it in less than a minute. If you're part of the sales, purchase or sales transaction, not rentals, because the regulation doesn't specifically cover rentals. But if you're related to somebody, you know, I'm the listing broker and the seller is my father, or it's part of a family trust that family trust or LLC that my husband and I, my spouse and I have, anything like that. Like, you're disclosing that information to the other buyer and other broker up front. So that's less than a minute. So that one is, the main questions I get are, you know, do I have to really disclose that there's a cousin-in-law in Rhode Island, we're all related to each other, there's just a couple of degrees of separation, but yeah, so just get that out there. Anyway, as I can tell, there are a ton of questions, so I'm gonna end on this note. Thank you for coming, happy to stay around. My contact information is on the back of the PowerPoint if I can answer any questions for you. So thank you very much for staying. I'm applauding you too.